If you want to learn, you have to first listen.
Hello, welcome to the very first episode of Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know. I am, as you have probably guessed, Matt O'Donnell. On today's show, my guest will be Dave Jacquin. Dave is the GM of Production Technology Partners, or PTP for short, and us local folk. He has also been a production manager, live sound engineer, and tour manager. Artists he's been on the road with include Dee Messina, Jake Shimabukuro, Hot Chelle Rae, and of course, the Sara Evans tour where he was my tour manager. Here are a few quick things up front before we get started. If you're hearing this, then it worked. I didn't want to consider hitting the button to publish this if I didn't think that the conversations I've gotten on tape would feel like something I would want to listen to if I were on your side of the speakers. In that spirit, I want to thank everyone who was excited about this podcast since it was announced. I couldn't have imagined how many people would be interested in hearing me explore all kinds of random topics, let alone get pumped about it. I will do my absolute best to not let you down. There is already a great upcoming lineup of guests for the show that I think you're going to be pretty interested in. I think that even within this first half dozen episodes that are in various stages of production, there's a diverse lineup of quality folks who have made this feel like something special right here from the beginning. Well, that's enough me for right now. Always more episodes to have things to get poetic about. I'm sure that we'll have running gags at some point, jokes, shout-outs, whatever. The talk I had with Dave Jacquin that you're about to hear is a whole lot of fun. In my local touring music world, I can't think of many people who are thought of as highly as Dave. You know that if Dave is running something, it will be done as well as it can be, and he'll figure out how to be given a budget of $100 but have it feel like $1 million. It was a really special feeling on the road to be in a small camp of people who were being taken care of by Dave. He has since moved into the role of GM with PTP, which means that he's taking years of that built-up logistical and personal skill and is now applying that to numerous tours at once. A real major domo, if you will. If you saw or were even made aware of tours for Morgan Wallen, Lauren Daigle, or the most recent CMA Entertainer of the Year, Lainey Wilson, you saw some of PTP and Dave's handiwork. Dave is also someone I talk to in some form or another pretty much every day, even if it's just sharing odd memes. Having him come in and be the guest on the launch episode of Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know seemed like a no-contest decision to me. Sometimes you need to remember that your friends are deeply experienced in stuff and ask them in detail about it too, not just assume you know what's going on. I'll see you on the other side of this chat for some housekeeping and stuff, but for now, enjoy my talk with my friend Dave Jacquin.
There's nothing I've said that you need to edit out, in my opinion.
I would mostly agree with that. So I tried to think about quantifying why we're friends, or what is the thread that brings that to be there. And I think about that because John Shaw and I have a number of things and they became apparent, but I think that you and I are sort of the human equivalents of what is that in Harry Potter, the room of requirement?
Yeah.
Where the room becomes whatever you need it to be,
right,
in order to happen.
100%.
And I think that you and I are both very resourceful people, or will figure out how to make whatever stupid thing happen.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think like that is the thing that like, and that being like life mantra-y, you know, you were talking before about, or a minute ago about not like wanting to have me get you started on printers.
Right.
And it makes me think of a time that many names will be omitted to protect the innocent or the very, very guilty.
Hold on, you ready? Hold for tone. Beep.
But me trying to conquer a printer for somebody,
right?
Only to realize it was not a printer at all.
Yeah, exactly.
But like that idea of, you know, I'm going to figure this out. Like there is a problem and I will figure out how to solve it. Yeah. Even if I need to like develop the resource or whatever. Yeah. I think that like we have that, and I think it is the thing that makes.
Yes. So I think one of the things that brings us together, that makes you and I, that makes that happen, is both of us tend to solve the moment of silence with humor.
Sure.
And so I think we're going to get back to this in a minute, because there was a question you asked me before we were in the room.
Oh yeah.
And it actually comes back to this exact point. And it's just one of those things that you and I both kind of started making jokes, and it was one of those, wow, we have similar sense of humors. We both have similar timing, and much like a solid tennis match, we can just go back and forth until one of us gets the other one to completely die laughing.
Yeah, it's a solid volley situation.
Yeah, and then it's a moment of like, okay, who's going to serve now? Right? Or like, I lost the point, I have to serve, right? Like,
yeah, for sure.
And then it goes back and forth again. And that is, you know, I think between sense of humor, music, I mean, you and I have very similar views on music, so we can talk fairly deeply about records or producers or those kind of situations. Love of coffee.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing, is that I have a lot of these things with a lot of people.
Correct.
But none of them are you.
Well, because we're on the radio, nobody can see how good looking I am.
Well, that's true.
And the fact that I'm willing to do some frontal nudity.
Yeah. I was going to say that you better hope that this never becomes a video podcast for your return appearances. But I'll tangent to say this. There will never be a video component to this. One, because I love radio.
It's a lost art.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, when I was growing up, my dad watched or listened to a lot of Don Imus. Mm-hmm. It's because we were in the New York area.
Right,
and, you know, WFAN was a Mets and Jets station, which would be for him. And
10-10 wins. News and weather together on the 10s.
That is accurate. And but Imus was, you know, Imus in the morning was WFAN. And so then MSNBC started simulcasting, and it wasn't bad, but you could tell that no matter how much you wanted to imagine the camera wasn't there, it was going to be there.
So okay, Matt, okay. Here's the question. I'll start with a statement. I am a big fan of listening to records. I would rather listen to a record than watch TV or a movie most times. That'd be my favorite form of media.
Yeah, Amanda finds it incredible how much music I listen to in the course of a day.
Right. And I think the reason I like listening to records, coming from somebody who's spent a lot of their life in live entertainment, is that it allows me to imagine what's going on in the background.
Yeah.
I can sit there and think about what the studio looks like and what the layout of the players are, or what technique they use to record it, or I can just listen to it and be like, this makes me happy, right?
Sure, yeah.
And I think that's where, like, especially like radio on TV becomes that, like, you lose that because you don't see, like, you want to imagine that it's a smoke-filled studio and he's going crazy and he's got 27 newspapers there and he's
for sure,
and he's freaking out, and then you find out that there's neon lights and a director telling him when to go to commercial, and it takes some of the magic away from it.
Yeah, and I'll probably walk myself back a few inches. I think Stern was on E at night long before Imus was on MSNBC. I think Stern, or they were like neck and neck.
It was neck and, yeah.
Which is hilarious because of their history of competition anyway.
Right, yeah.
But, you know, at least the Stern show, like late night on E, was a vibe.
But it was also heavily edited.
Sure, of course. Yeah, it wasn't the whole show
and I think that's
all.
the, like, where Imus was more live, right? It was just a live, literally, hey, it's from 8 to 10, here's the show, and it's going to air at this time period. Where Stern was very much like, hey, we took what happened today, and due to content and FCC regulations, we have to edit heavily what actually makes it to television.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I just think that it also managed to be visually compelling.
Well,
like it was worth watching.
Yes, like that's the truth. Like, you know, like having the visual of some of the things that were talked about on Stern. Yes, when he says, "You are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen topless," and you can see that, it's amazing. You know, when you see, you know, and I think that like it puts it into perspective, but like when you don't see that, I think it's a little more raw.
Sure.
And I think it opens a lot of room for you to process it.
Yeah. And I guess the thing is, how much better is "You are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen topless" when you can't see that?
Right. Yeah.
Like it is so much more interesting.
100. And this is, gosh, we're going to jump into it.
We're doing it.
We're jumping in. So like, and this is and I've told you this before. I personally hate the fact that currently in music you can say whatever you want. One of the things I love about 50s and 60s music, 70s, is there were still things you weren't allowed to say.
Uh-huh.
So lyrically, you had to create a story because you couldn't just come out and say, "This is the most beautiful person I want to see naked, and I'm going to shove my penis in her." You can say that now exactly like that. In the 50s, you had to say, "I want to hold your hand."
Sure. Or "I can't tell you who to sock it to."
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
right. Like,
it's a great line full of great phonetics. And like
100%.
It's about like, I can't tell you who to bang.
Right, exactly. And I think that's one of those things that like the art of audio medium allows.
Yeah, I agree. Also, for the most part, podcasts that have a video version on YouTube or whatever is just two dudes' heads, you know, like on screen. Like that's not a thing either. Like that is sort of really what made me think like I have no interest in getting to, you know, I'm being lofty here, but getting to 50 episodes and be like, and now we're also going to do video.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, because even someone like Joe Rogan, like, to what end? It's just,
well, I think that's the other side is then like somebody like Joe Rogan, because they put clips up, you know, you watch the 30-second clip of the excitement.
Yeah.
But it's 3 hours to get to that moment.
Yeah. Right.
And so, and honestly, like for me, I think you're similar. Like I listen to podcasts while I'm driving.
Yeah.
Or I listen to podcasts while I'm doing something. I'm doing another task that needs my visual cortex.
And also the other part of that is I wonder how many people watch an entire Joe Rogan show, like looking at it.
Right. You know.
Yeah. It was like, whereas we're talking about being totally disconnected from a visual element to be doing something else, I would imagine that most people probably split watching versus like wandering around the house while it's on YouTube on their smart TV.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting. But anyway, all that to say, your partial frontal nudity is totally acceptable here.
Great.
Yeah.
Pardon me while I take my shirt off. We both don't. Yeah, no, I'm not. Let me put a tank top on. No, that's wrong too.
Christmas jammies are somewhere around here.
Are they really?
Maybe.
Do you have both sets?
No, I only have my set.
I don't know where my set went. I think somebody stole it. if you stole my Christmas jammies, please return them by December 24th.
I can only think of like 15 people max that would be.
Yeah,
but
I know.
Who knows,
Whoever stole them, they probably need them more than I do.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so let's get into it. How different, positive or negative, would it be for touring music if we could teleport to and from the shows?
You asked me this and wouldn't let me answer earlier, and
this is why.
I know why, and the answer is it depends. I think music as a whole would be a disaster. Touring music would be I think teleporting at the end of the night would make touring miserable. And here's why. And it goes back to the other question of like, how in the world are we close friends with everything?
Sure. There
is something about the post-show experience. And I think this applies also to people who go to shows. As somebody who's worked in professional music, as a music professional, most of my favorite moments have been post-show hangs, or even like the train wreck that is, oh my gosh, it fell apart tonight, and we have to figure out how to get it back together before tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Right? And like the moment of like, and they seem to start the same way, of like a beverage being poured and we either killed it or we have to fix it.
Yeah.
And then
we either killed it or it killed us.
Yeah. And then you have to figure out how to recreate it, like how to do it again. Right.
Yeah, right.
And so those moments of sitting on a bus watching the Home Shopping Network and making fun of it is huge, right?
I'm the stupidest person alive. I think of like the stupidest.
Right,
I'm talking about the Home Shopping Network.
Yeah, no,
like,
yeah. But
like what a ridiculous thing when I hear it back to myself.
But like that's but it's hysterical because you're all like, at that point you're as a crew personnel, crew side of the touring, like it's now 1:00 in the morning. I've been working since 7 or 8. I am beyond punch drunk.
Yeah.
Possibly slightly alcohol drunk, and around people that I really like. And I'm spoiled. I've had some really good tours. I've had some really good touring families that truly are lifelong friends. And so having those moments with everybody, it's just, you're hanging out with your buddies. And I think that that's a really good thing. Now,
no, I think that is most likely the answer. I think the synergy is the answer.
Because when you look at like musically, I think you see the difference here too. When all of a sudden each band member gets their own bus, and after the show they don't hang out, they just go their separate ways till tomorrow at sound check.
Yeah.
There's less of that excitement.
I agree. I think it is one of my long-held beliefs that bands are at their best when they are required to spend all of their time together. Mm-hmm. Like when you're a band that like comes on the scene,
right,
and you have probably a 4-year window of dropping an album, touring behind it incessantly, then there's no break into recording the second record, and then you're touring that. Mm-hmm. Once that ends and everybody goes home for a while and it becomes, we get together for 3 months and play shows, we go home, we get together to make a record. Like, I love my family, right. But and probably, at this point in my life, I am probably too old to be involved in something quite like that. And family has a lot to do with that. But I think that there's something about that momentum and that just total like lockstep familiarity that once you start devoting large chunks of your time to other things and then coming back into it, that is when it becomes less reliable of a synergy
right
kind of thing.
I think it's just one of those, like, I've always said that touring puts weird people together.
Yeah.
And
you've got to be weird to do it.
Right. And like, there are a lot of people who are some of my dearest friends who if you put us in a room, I would have been like, hell no.
Sure.
I do not want to hang out with that person.
Yeah.
But some of those people are my closest and best friends because we went through something, together and have that experience. And so we share that. And a lot of that happens in the early mornings of like, hey, I can't sleep. You can't sleep. We just rolled into town. There's a place across the street that has coffee and some kind of really crappy breakfast. Let's go try it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And then you go do that. And so like, if you could teleport in right before you're needed, you would miss that moment.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And honestly, like, as somebody who just recently came off the road, that was when asked, like, what do you miss about touring? There's very little between the start of the show and the end of the show that I miss. Very little.
Yeah.
The things I miss are crappy cups of coffee from a hotel lobby. Being really just silly at an airport at 4:00 in the morning because it's the only way you can stay awake to make sure you get the flight out.
Yeah.
The late night, somehow I just ate half a pizza by myself at 3:00 in the morning because I don't know why.
Yeah.
The what happens when you take 3 different kinds of double stuffed Oreos and put them together and eat them at one time, right? Like,
yeah,
those are the things, how many Oreos can you stack on somebody's shoulder before they wake up? The answer's 11.
There's photo evidence to prove it.
There's photo. And I think that's those are the things that make that, as much as I'd like to be home, like, the road is my family as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think I honestly think you would lose a lot of, I think the show would suffer tremendously.
I think that's right.
And I think, I would go as far as, like, the music as a whole would suffer because, like, look at, I'm not going to pull out a specific record, but look at records where people lock themselves, a band or artist or whoever, lock themselves in a studio for a month or 2 months. And when they had those moments of creativity, they could just pounce on it versus, hey, we have a session from 11 to 3 tomorrow. So come prepared to, and we only have 6.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's sort of, there's a lot about how records get made now, how easy it is to record something, which, don't get me wrong, our entire purpose in this moment is enabled by the fact that an accumulation of $8,000 of stuff over 15 years or whatever, and owning a house, has me have a recording studio
right.
here
Yeah,
that
exactly.
we're sitting in
right.
now, as opposed to that would be incomprehensible unless you were someone like Slash 25 years ago.
Right. And the fact that you and I could have done this in your car on the device we have in our pocket.
Yeah, right. The idea that we are actually operating at a higher level than we could to get pretty fine
story
results.
of my life.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
operating at the highest level of stupidity. No, but I think, but that's the short answer is, if you could teleport anywhere, I think it dulls the story.
Sure. I mean, that's
and that's, I think that's what it comes down to.
Such an easy trope of, like, the journey is more important than the destination.
Are you calling me easy?
I mean,
yeah, but no, I mean, true, right? And like, and there's something good about everybody being miserable, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But we're miserable together.
Right. Like, the movie would be really short, right? Vacation would be a really short movie if they got on a plane and landed in California and went to an amusement park.
Wally World.
Yeah, right. The great part is like, it's literally, dare I say, Vacation it's Spinal Tap.
Yeah, it's family Spinal Tap.
It's family Spinal Tap, and it is just that moment of like, nothing else can go wrong. Oh crap, it did.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's that is touring. And if you don't have those moments, like you and I have both been on a tour where like everything is just easy.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't say easy. Everything is going the way it's supposed to. It's staying mostly on schedule. There's no drama. Like breakfast is served at 8:00 and it was out at 8:01.
Yeah.
Like dinner is supposed to be up at 5 and they said it was ready at 4:45. Things are great. Right?
Yeah.
Nothing broke on the bus. And that is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have many stories from those days. I have lots of stories of, well, there we were on the side of the road.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, or like, oh man, do you remember that night that, we all tied one on a little too heavy and, thank God there's no pictures.
Yeah, I will say for numerous reasons, we don't need to like go through a bunch of our shared experience stories here, but the fact that we in that time never had to switch buses,
right,
is actually kind of a miracle,
right,
of modern touring.
Yeah,
the idea that in something like 20 months there was never a time that it was like, well, the bus is totally fucked and
right,
they're sending another one and we're
right,
gotta get on it. That never happened.
You're welcome.
Yeah, sure.
But that's the truth. I mean, that's there was a lot of times that it was like, hey, nothing's going wrong. And the things that were going wrong were comical.
Yeah.
Right? And like, or self-inflicted.
Yeah. Comical or self-inflicted or someone self-inflicting and the rest of us using comedy to deflect it.
And I think that's where you and I, our friendship blossomed, is that in those situations we could go, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. Who's making coffee? Right?
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
Or, there's something, here's the perfect example. If there wasn't those moments, I would not have been able to experience you going to Buc-ee's for the first time at 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And eating a brisket and something sandwich or pastrami and something. And without having that experience with you, as dumb as it sounds, our friendship would be different.
Sure, I agree. What's funny about that is that I have never been to another Buc-ee's that has the brisket pastrami sandwich other than that time. And I check the kiosk every time we go in, and nowhere has it. I cannot understand. Now, they do, I learned a few weeks ago, have a triple meat sandwich now, which is
also your nickname in college.
Well,
yeah.
Something 3 dozen. I don't know.
Yeah.
Circumference.
Like a tuna can.
It's turkey on the bottom, smoked turkey, brisket, sausage.
How do you feel about smoked turkey?
Great. Oh boy, I got a blank stare back at that. That's smoked turkey is often my like go-to at a place that I think can take pride in it.
I think I've had bad smoked, or I shouldn't say bad. I've had subpar smoked turkey that has let me down.
Depending on where it's from, it is one of the ways in which I think that it doesn't dry out as badly.
Right. I think I've just had some dry.
Yeah, because that's the problem with turkey.
Of course, yeah, as a whole. Poultry as a whole.
Well, I mean, you can get better at a chicken. Even dark meat on turkey can be terribly dry.
That's true.
Yeah, once on Top Chef there was a challenge where they had to do a different poultry each person, and nobody wanted the turkey. Right,
like, yeah.
And brine helps.
Right.
there's
Yeah.
there are ways to help it, but at the end of the day, Thanksgiving has really screwed up like everything for us.
Yeah. I think I just had some bad experience because it would not be my first choice.
Yeah. So again, I mean, if I go to a place and I find that the turkey there is good, I will then order it every time. Because then that's the thing with barbecue too, is like what is the method? What are they doing to it?
Correct.
And then once I know someone has a solid pathway, I feel good about ordering it on the regular.
Right.
From them.
Okay.
Okay. So the thing that made me start thinking about the idea of like the room of requirement thing.
Yeah.
Is when we were hanging out with your buddy Brock, and you mentioned like having recorded like early songs of his.
Oh yeah.
And it makes me wonder, or it has been like making me wonder as I've been thinking about having you here, how did you end up being a touring person? Because through discussions and overt statements like that, the room of requirement thing comes from me thinking like you did everything.
Right.
Like up until you decided to like embark on touring as a thing.
Right.
Like that you went out of your way to like record demos for people.
Yeah.
And so like rather than like taking like that route, how did you end up in like touring?
So a long time ago, when I was in high school, I kind of started getting into the audio side of things.
Mm-hmm.
All your friends are starting to have bands and everybody's like, oh, we should do this. And was involved with a church that had a nice budget and had some decent gear to play with.
As they do.
And a family friend of ours was touring. He was a monitor engineer at the time. And so it's kind of one of those like, oh man, he gets to do cool things. That's fun. Like you hear about, oh, you went to where? And like you got to do this. Oh, that's fun. I've always been into music. I'm a terrible musician. I mean, like, especially around the company I keep, right? Like,
Sure.
I played bass in a band in my junior year of high school.
Anyone can play bass in a band in junior year of high school.
We were called Blue Light Special. We played one gig.
Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, I played chords on the bass. We're not going to show it. They're not going to bring any of that out. But the thing is that I just kind of got involved, and then mistakenly, some people at a church decided to give me keys to the building and the code for the alarm. And so when they
saw you as trustworthy.
Yeah. So when you're 16 and have friends who want to record music and you're kind of getting into it, you go, okay, well, nobody's in the building at 1:00 in the morning. We should go in there and turn things on.
Yeah.
And so like, what's funny is, you bring up Brock. There's another friend of mine, Michelle, who this is before I found out how to hook up the multi-track recorder. She needed a demo for a piano demo, a vocal demo for a college. And we literally we did 3 passes on top of tape, on top straight up, like regular old fashioned, like not multi-track tape. Like this is what we record the sermon on.
Yeah.
And so like we did the pass with her vocal or with the piano, played that back so she could do the vocal, and then played it back one more time so she could do the harmony. And so like, and then took it to the duplicator and made 6 copies of it so she could send it out for college
for
stuff.
auditions. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, okay, cool. And then, it's, friends are going like, hey, we want to do something. Like, okay, cool. How do we do this? Okay, let's get, now I found out where the multi-track recorder was, and I found out how to get tape for that. And like,
yeah.
Then I was like, okay, so if everybody's out by 11, I can get in there. It'll take me an hour to get this set up. So you come in at midnight, and then in exchange for you doing this, you have to help me set everything up for the Sunday service.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like, cause
sure. Yeah.
we're going to move stuff around, but then we have to get it back. So nobody knows
you have to get
here.
the bar.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
And so we did that, and it just became this, like, it became really fun. But what I always liked was what I really liked about that whole process was I had to get it done in one night.
Sure.
I kind of had one shot. It was all on tape. It was into a console that was going to get messed up the next morning for whatever it was being used for. And so there was no save. There was no try and do it back.
Yeah.
And so we were doing everything is like, hey, we're going to record it on Thursday. And then next Wednesday, you're going to come in and we're going to mix it. And then we're done.
Yeah.
And so it became that it was very live. It was very much, and I'm recording it in a giant auditorium. So there was this super live sound to everything. And at the same time, still working on Sunday services, and then started working. There was a club that allowed us to come in, even though we were underage, would come in and do audio. Friend Brock played there a little bit. And so we would come in and got to mix, and it was like, oh, this is fun. And like mixing became just a really fun thing. And I really liked that moment of doing it in a live environment and knowing like I had one chance.
Yeah, for sure.
And so what that led to was a moment of, hey, let's get into live sound. So I went to college to study audio and accounting, which are two really close fields.
I was about to say you could not have picked more, even though they're kind of right next to each other in the like syllabus guide.
Yeah, I'll take the top two, please.
Yeah. They could not be more diametrically opposed.
But that was the thing is then I went to college and I ended up I was missing a prerequisite for audio, which there was none in the syllabus or in any of the guides, but they were like, no, you have to have this class. And I was like, this is complete BS. And ended up talking to my friend who was touring, and he was like, well, I know, he's like, there's this gospel band that needs a monitor engineer. You want me to put your name into the hat? And I was like, yes, because I didn't like college. I wasn't having fun. And that got me into live. Yeah. And then it kind of snowballed from there, because all of a sudden, when you tell a kid who's 18, hey, you can travel the world, somebody else is going to pay for it. Oh, and you get to see a free show every night, and then a few years later down the road, and drink free beer.
Yeah.
Right. Like, yeah, like,
yes, please.
You want to know how to get people to join the military, right? Like, it was just like, of course I want to do this. And then honestly, I went down the rabbit hole and was like, this is really fun. And like, oh, they don't tell you about this in college or in high school. You can make a career doing this. Like, and you start meeting people and they're like, oh yeah, I make lots of money doing this. I have a nice house and a family. And you're like, I thought the only way I could do this was to become an accountant. Yeah. Right. And
yeah.
And then, 24 years later, you've been to 18 countries. You haven't paid for a flight, for yourself in years because of frequent flyer miles. Yep. And you go, huh, it was pretty cool. And, still don't have a college degree. Right. But have accomplished as much as I've wanted to and more.
Yeah. You got something in there that I was thinking about before I was listening to another podcast and this idea came up. How were you at school? Not college. Like what was your relationship with high school like?
I was very much an outcast in a way. A lot of people knew who I was because of like when I had access to help people make music, right? Like, so people knew me because like, my friend Brock, he and I went to high school together. So like people knew me because I recorded Brock's demo. People knew me because I helped put together the mixtape for so-and-so's performance.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's who I was known as. I wasn't popular. I had friends.
Yeah. Of course.
But it was more like school wasn't a big thing for me. Wasn't a big fan. Was kind of the outcast and borderline nerdy guy. But everybody knew me because I had really good, like everyone was like, the dude knows music.
Yeah.
Like people would come to me and be like, hey, can you help me make a cool tape? Or like, I was always making, mixtapes for friends, and people would be like, man, these are great songs.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, right. And so that's what I was known for more than anything.
Yeah, I asked, the point that had come up in that podcast was someone was saying how it's not built for creative or emotional people, which I think is true. I'm not as hard on traditional education as a lot of people are.
Right.
I think that there are great benefits to it, and I think that some complaints are kind of just hogwash.
Right.
But I did think it was interesting a couple of years ago, my mom, in the final job she had before she retired, taught for 2 years at my high school, my Catholic high school.
Right.
And the principal who was there when I was there then too. He actually just retired last year after 51 years or something like that of being there. And my mom was telling him some story about when I was a kid, and his reaction was basically I would have never thought he was that bright.
Right. No,
and
yeah.
It's just interesting to think I found it a little offensive. I also have accomplishment to back up the lack of truth of that.
Right. Well,
but
here's what's interesting. So, I'm trying to think if you were, you would have been there when we were in California sometime in the last little bit.
Sure.
Sometime recently. And I actually went and I had coffee with my friend Michelle, who I recorded that piano demo for. And we were talking, and I don't care about any of the school stuff from high school, right?
Yeah.
I'm never going to go to a
homecoming or reunion, doesn't matter.
Yeah, no reunions or anything. Yeah, exactly. So Michelle and I are sitting there having coffee in California. It was beautiful and sunny, and and she goes, "You're the only one I know who actually knew what they were going to do when they were that age," which is crazy to think, because she does orchestration stuff for TV, and
cool.
she's still in music,
yeah,
and still plays and does all this stuff and works on TV, and it's great, and kind of proud of what she's accomplished. But she's like, you actually are the only one who did it without with reckless abandon. You were like, I'm going to do this for a living, and then left and have always done that, and never were I've never took the job at Starbucks. I just was like, yeah, I'm going to keep myself available until the next tour comes along.
Same.
And so hearing that said to me 20 something years later, I met Michelle when I was in 7th grade. She was one of the first people I met when I moved to Colorado in school. And it was just one of those things. It was wow, you're right. This is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And for some reason, nobody talked me out of it.
When dozens of people should have.
Right, 100%. And that's
what every person in entertainment thinks is someone should have talked me out of this. How did nobody talk me out of this?
Exactly. It's but I think that, and I mean, you have a similar, it's that moment of hey, you just kind of were this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. For years, I think about my 8th grade yearbook profile, because that was the graduating class of that school. There was no high school. So and it says on it occupation, which who the fuck asks an 8th grader their occupation? Or it's either who the fuck asks an 8th grader what their chosen occupation is going to be, or they know that it's going to be funny to look at it and see what happened.
Right.
To most people. You want to do that. And look, you're, managing a party city.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I don't know anybody managing a party city. Or I don't know anybody who went on to manage a party city, nor do I know any party city managers. So I think I'm pretty safe in not having offended anybody there.
Yeah.
But mine says professional musician. And when I did that profile, I probably had been playing the bass for 3 months.
Right.
I was playing clarinet then, primarily. Wow. And so the idea that I couldn't tell you what I was thinking at the time, but something about it was just there. And so the fact that I have that, because it's funny to me, because the photo is me in 8th grade with frosted tips, but just in the front.
Oh.
And So like,
bring it back.
That photo is funny for me to show people, but the whole like, banner profile I have sitting around, and I've been struck for a long time in my adult life by thinking that it is that yearbook that tells me this is what you like wanted to do and you fucking did it.
Right.
Like,
I mean, that's the thing. It was in 10th grade. There was I don't even know what class it was or anything, but it was like a draw picture of where you see yourself in 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I drew a stage like with big speakers and lights and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't even know what this means. Right. Like I remember even as I was drawing it or writing it out, it's like, I don't know what this means, but it looks cool. And I think that's what I want to do.
Yeah. I was probably in the 8th grade sometime, or maybe a little later, maybe like 9th grade, the first time I ever took normal earbuds and looped them around my ear. So I was pretending they were in-ears.
Oh, man.
Just something about the idea of never having, at that time, had a pair of earbuds that went up around the back of your ear and then in, and being like, what if I just did this? What if I just took the cable and just ran it around? Oh, I feel like I'm wearing it in-ears.
Yeah, so cool now.
Cool now. Yeah.
I still feel that way when I put mine in.
I do too. At least we put them in on the right side.
In the right side.
That's an Easter egg.
God help the people who don't. Yeah. So, okay. What was the first bass you had?
Oh, the first bass I had was an Aria Pro 2, which I give my mom a lot of shit to other people.
Right.
For this. I'm an only child. I am the pride of my mother's life. And the fact that she was adamant to the music store guy for Christmas that I needed a left-handed bass because I was left-handed.
Right.
Is like the dark mark on like my life, because I'd have spent so much less money on instruments and things like that if I just played right-handed, and I would have never thought of it beforehand. It wasn't until, but I had never also touched a bass before I owned one, and so getting a left-handed one put in my hands and just playing it just led down that road. I didn't know any better, and I was just like, yep, this is how it goes. Little string on the bottom, big string on top. Let's fucking go, it was a black Aria Pro 2, and I played that bass. I didn't play it long. I went through a lot of cheap basses early on.
Yeah.
I had an acoustic bass shortly afterward, a 5-string bass shortly afterward, and like a...
Death to the 5-string bass.
Squire equivalent as you look over at my basses to see.
I was like, crap, there's one in here.
Yeah. And then like a Squire equivalent Steinberger for a minute.
Yeah.
But the other kid who was a year ahead of me in high school learned how to slap on on a Steinberg. He had the same one. He had it in white and I got it in black. And he was super mad because I was being a poser, which I fully admit I was being a poser, but I was like, I mean, when you're 15, slap bass is just cool. And if he learned how to do it on that bass and not the other one he was playing, well then, God damn it, I'm going to get this bass and figure out how to slap. And it wasn't expensive.
Yeah.
And then I bought my first nice bass the next year. My first nice bass was bought for me.
Nice.
And from then on, it's kind of been... I own a good few basses, probably like close to 10. I actually don't know. I'd have to think about it.
Yeah.
But I kind of, for the most part, have gone through periods where it's like, for the next 5 years, I'm playing this one bass.
Right, yeah.
And then that just turns over. And so I've never had like a ton. But also being left-handed, you kind of have to figure out what you like and then ride that for a while. Until the next thing comes along that someone can make you or something is
convince you to try.
Yeah. So then how did you, this is sort of a 2-part question, which leads to another part of a broader question.
Love it.
But so how did you move from doing audio into tour managing? And the reason I ask that is because if there's one thing about you that everybody that knows you knows, is that you know how to run a tour a level above, if not multiple levels above, what its conditions should be based on budgets and things like that. Thank you. That's nice. I think that's what everybody would say about you. And so,
okay, so here's the short version is this: as I started out as a monitor engineer.
Yeah.
Quickly, monitor engineer, then front of house engineer was leaving the tour, and as a 20-year-old really cocky kid, when they asked if I knew anybody to hire for front of house, I said, I do, but you'd be disappointed because they're not me. And so I got the job and quickly learned how much I loved it. And then the guy who was the production manager on the tour quit, and in a fairly abrupt fashion.
Sure.
And as you know, when somebody on a tour quits, there's two solutions. Either somebody picks up the slack or you're miserable.
Uh-huh.
And so as the guy who knew the most, who could pick up the slack, I picked up the slack and became the production manager.
Yeah.
And did that for a couple of years and really enjoyed it. Like, I actually really enjoyed that side of it. Then, and it worked on some mid-sized tours as a production manager. Then was offered kind of a tour manager spot on working for a solo artist who was going to be doing full band things, but for the first couple months was going to be just him and I on the road doing solo acoustic shows.
Yeah.
And it was an artist I wanted to work with. Seemed like a really smart thing. And so I said, sure, I'll do this. And so then all of a sudden I had to learn how to do the tour manager side and the logistics of that. And in that I kind of was like, well, when it was just the two of us, it was like, well, okay, so how do you make it a little better, right? Because why stay at the Hampton Inn when you can stay at the Hilton? Why have crappy deli meat when you could have nicer deli meat, right? Like, how do you make the situation better? And so I started, I just started doing it and figuring out, like, hey, if I can save, okay, we only have $50 to eat on a day between the two of us. Okay, but if we only spend $30 for 2 days, now I have $75 or whatever. And so that means we can go someplace nicer on Thursday.
Yeah.
And so, like, Thursday became nicer dinner that night.
Yeah,
and so,
that's great.
And that was literally how we did it. And it was like, okay, so yeah, nobody cared. Like, neither of us cared. Like, okay, so we're gonna have cheap Chinese on Tuesday, so that we can go and have a steak on Thursday, right? And so it was like, and all of a sudden it became something special. I was like, oh, okay. So how do you keep making those little special things, right? With artists, I've always, like, I have notes on things they like. I had notes with band guys on, like, hey, or band people, musicians, just on things that made people happy. So it was very easy to go, like, I'm much like you, big coffee guy. So it was like, hey, I found out real quick that it's amazing what a cup of coffee will do for somebody.
Sure.
And it'll do for morale.
Yeah.
So, like, okay, cool. If I get coffee for everybody on Fridays and we figure out how to expense that out, it makes everybody happy. It took zero work for me. All I had to do was write down everybody's coffee order once and hit save. Right?
Yeah. The name of your memoir is going to be How to Go from Expensing Coffee on Friday to Expensing Coffee Every Day.
Well, industry secret. But no, it really was. And it's something very simple, right? Like, and it became a thing that, like, people knew that, like, it's 3:00. Did Dave get coffee today?
Yeah. Right.
Right. Or
did I miss the coffee order?
100%. And there was a couple of years on bigger tours and everything that, like, I was sent, like, people knew that if you wanted coffee, all you had to do is ask. Like, at 9:45, the runner is leaving to get Dave coffee. This is before I had friends who could make good coffee on the road.
Sure.
And part of this was one of the guys I worked with, my friend Mike. He would every morning when he got up, he would find a Starbucks. And his thing was he didn't actually like the coffee. There was two reasons he went to Starbucks every day. And it to me, they're amazing. Number one was it got him out of the venue.
Mm-hmm.
So it gave him an excuse. He was like, there's usually a Starbucks within a mile of every venue in North America.
Yeah. Nobody knows how hard it is or how hard it can be. I mean, we weren't on tour in arenas that way, but, when your buses are parked under an arena, you don't have to leave.
At all.
You never have to leave.
Yeah, and breakfast, lunch, and dinner are served, and you never have to leave.
And even at theater level where we were, you can walk off the bus and into the venue and never leave.
Yep.
Like that
it's the Hotel California.
Yeah, it's like it is a very underrated to, a non,
right,
like a way to explain like, no, we can be on the road. We can be all over the country and never see fucking anything.
So every day Mike would leave and go get coffee, and it was part of this, like, he's like, he would never go more than 1.5 miles. If it was more than 1.5 miles, he'd ask for a runner. But he would go and walk. And like, that was his, like, he's like, I'm getting exercise. He goes, I can walk 1.5 miles in, 30, 45 minutes, like go get a cup of coffee, turn around, come back. I'm gone for 2 hours. He was our merch manager. So his day didn't start till later. If he did have to load in early, he'd load in and then go do this. So that was the thing, is I just need to get out. And I was like, God, that's a great reason.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in the early days of the Starbucks card, right? Like
sure.
When they were giving points away for everything, right?
Yeah.
So what he was doing was he shared a card with his daughter, and he would buy coffee, and so he would get the points.
Yeah.
And then she would use them to get coffee on Fridays.
Yeah.
So like he would go and he'd always want to be like, hey, if anybody wants coffee, just give me cash.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And so he would go and literally buy all these and get Starbucks cards and points and all this stuff to give to his daughter so she could get free coffee. And I was like, gosh, what a thoughtful guy.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, I was like, man, that he's working the system. Like,
yes.
and he knew how to break the system. He's like, okay, if you want extra syrup, I have to make it in a separate order. And like, he would go in and he's the guy who would go in and be like, okay, so for the first coffee, I need a black coffee. That would be mine. And he'd pay for it on the card. And he's like, just that. Then he'd get back in line and he'd be like, I need a soy latte. And then he would go and get back in line and like,
see, that's the thing. I as a lover of a system breaking myself,
yeah,
I would be so much more inclined in those situations just hand somebody a list, and I know what he was doing, but I would probably say, hey, can we just make them all separate transactions?
Well, so he would do that, but if they would give him crap about that, he would just get back in line.
Yeah, sure, because there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, this is the same guy who used to try and figure out how to break TSA every time we flew, and it was annoyingly fun. But yeah, it's just one of those things. You figure out how to do that. Like, and that's I think I figured out how to gamify tour management, right? Like how to make it fun, and somebody. And it's true, I've been on both sides of this. It's a lot harder to tour manage a medium-sized act with 2 buses going into theaters than it is dealing with multiple trucks and a 120-person crew. When I had, a 120-person crew, an assistant, and other people, like my catering team was in the building at 5 a.m. Breakfast was brought to me. Like, my assistant knew my coffee order and would send it out at 9:45, and it would be on my desk at 10 a.m. Yeah. Right? Like, that's easy. Like, there was stress to that stuff. But
that's because when you have like 20 people across 2 buses, everybody is kind of multitasking a bit. It becomes so much more. There are so many more lanes when you have 100 people.
Yeah.
And when people like just do their job, the cumulative effect of that is so much easier.
Right. And so and at that point, my job was, I'm overseeing everybody else doing their work, which is great. And so, yeah, I'd get my morning work done. Breakfast was brought to me because my caterers were awesome.
Right.
And like, here comes Dave's cup of bacon down the hall. And then, 10 o'clock, Dave's walking coffee came in. And then I'd go and walk around and check in on all the departments. And then, it's lunchtime, and go get a piece of cake and put it in a cup and walk around with that. And it was easy. Like, and I was still dealing with drama and there's everything. But like, there was just, I didn't see the band till sound check.
Right.
I didn't have to worry, but I also didn't have to worry about them, because if they needed to go to the hotel or need to go to the gym or whatever, an assistant who dealt with that. Like I had a PA
for sure.
who dealt with that. And so I was just waiting for, I spent my day working on travel for something that's 3 weeks. Like, hey, next month when we're in, Venezuela, I literally am working on security for that and the advance on that. It's 3 weeks out, and but there's a show going on tonight in Des Moines.
Yeah.
But I'm just ahead of the game. And so you get, and then everyone's going, wow, we're so well taken care of or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, but that was weeks ago. Like, oh,
right.
Crap. Oh, crap. Is today Friday? Oh, it's Ice Cream Friday.
Yeah. But also, I guess a thing about that is if you don't, plans change so last minute, just like little details, that if the overall structure isn't in place, then those little changes make bigger fires.
Correct.
So by having it kind of like out,
Yeah. And man, the amount of plan C's and D, and F, G that I have.
Yeah. You should always plan for plan C.
Yeah. Well, it's the truth. And the artists that we worked with, and there was a lot of changes. There were a lot of scheduling changes. There was a lot of work on that. Mm-hmm. But in that, you have to keep, the goal is to keep morale high, right?
Yeah.
If everybody's happy, and if you can convince people to do the things you don't like to do, because I think because they are helping you, but there is a lot of things I don't like to do. One of the things I hate to do, I'm just gonna put it out there. I hate delivering after show food to a bus.
Yeah.
There's 900 other things I'm doing at that point in time. I'm trying to wrap up the day. I'm dealing with everything that's going on. If you can convince somebody, which I did, to deliver it for you, thank you, John Shaw. It makes my life easier.
No, of course.
But it also keeps, here's the best part, is that it gets it to people like you quicker. So you're like, oh man, we're so well taken care of.
Yeah.
No, just John knew that if he wanted to eat after show food, I just had to come get it off my desk.
Yeah, right.
But it was one more thing that I didn't have to do at the end of the night. So cool, we made it, we have a commitment.
Yeah. So, man, so many of the things that I'm going to follow up on I was going to kiss your ass for being really thoughtful, and now it's just
don't do it, because
you're a schemer is what you're really revealing.
Everybody, I can put you in touch with at least 10 people who will tell you that within 3 days of being on a new tour, I will have somebody getting me coffee, and if you ever are around me, watch it happen. Because I will find somebody to make me or bring me coffee.
Yeah.
Within 3 days, I'll find the sucker.
Yeah. So I think the question my sub question to that one had a lot to do with the idea that, for the majority of the time that we were on the road together, you were tour managing and production managing the same thing. Right. Which is mostly unfortunate because that's a Dave question. Yeah. Or Dave help is so much greater in that way. You kind of put yourself over the two things that mean that when something breaks or something goes wrong, it has to get to you inevitably. Right. And the real question that I kind of have is, for as long as I've been in touring, and, you and I aren't that different in age, so it wasn't a reinvention of the wheel by the time I was coming around, but, small bands or bands that were playing rooms the size of, hey, remember 12th and Porter?
Oh, miss it.
The tour manager front of house guy combo. Yep. How do you think that combining roles like that on the road, in kind of the same thought as the teleportation, what does combining roles like that do?
It gets people fired quicker.
Sure.
There's, from a budget standpoint, it makes 100% sense.
Of course.
From a logistics standpoint, it makes sense. From a person in an office, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. Here's the overarching problem with touring. Is that there's 3 moments in the day that you need somebody for every job. A single person for every job. You need that at load in. You need that at doors, and you need that when the show ends. Okay. So during the day,
Why at doors?
Because at that point you're making sure everybody has to sign off that the show is ready to go, right? Like,
okay,
we're going to open the building up. Are we ready to, like, at this point there's no, like, the time is actually like, hey, we can hold the show a few minutes, but like, are we going to let people into the building? Like, are we close enough to being done that we can let people into the building? Because I can go, like, if the show's starting at 8:00 and you come to me at 7:55 and go, oh shit, my strings broke, I can hold the show for 5 minutes for you to change strings.
Yeah.
If at 6:00 for doors, you go, oh, by the way, the lighting rig isn't hung yet, I have a whole nother set of things I have to deal with.
Yeah, sure.
So there's just those moments that, like, you need multiple people in the position. So so that's where it gets really difficult for me. And that was one of the hardest parts, is like, at the beginning of the day, like, okay, we're walking into a building and I need to do all, which I slack at sometimes, the signage to tell the band where to go so that I don't have to answer those questions. Like putting up arrows, putting up room names. We're unloading a truck that I have to oversee while talking to the catering department to go be like, yes, for the 9th time, lunch is at noon. I want it to be out at 11:45. Yes, the guys will start showing up at 11:45 if it's not out here. Like, oh, there's like 7 other, I got to talk to the box office. Like, yes, I told you again, you're going to have your will call list by 3:00. No, I'm not going to give it to you at 2:00. It's going to be right at 3:00. That's how my day works. Like, all of those plates that had to spin up at the beginning of the day, it's very hard to do. Like, you need multiple people.
Sure. Yeah.
So, like, you either have to schedule that out. Like, as you know, like, a lot of times I would go into the building an hour before we unloaded.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was to deal with some of those silly questions so that when it came time to unload, I could actually focus on, hey, this is what's happening now, making sure it's working. And the same thing goes for after the show. Like, you need people to help you do things because you're literally packing up a city and putting it back in a truck.
Yeah, of course.
And so there's that thing. And so that's when multiple people suck. On smaller tours, man, I have gotten more work because I can do multiple jobs. But at the same time, like, one of the tours I was let go from, and it was slightly mutual, but I wasn't able to focus enough attention on the band after the show because I was dealing with the tour management, production management side of getting trucks loaded, settling a show, and the band's like, hey, I need more attention.
Yeah. And
I'm going, well, you need to hire somebody because I'm currently doing 2 jobs.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a hard thing. But at the same time, I'm greedy and wanted the money, right? And so, like, yeah, we could have hired somebody else, but I was going to have to take a pay cut. Well, I don't want to take a pay cut.
Yeah, no, nobody ever wants to do that.
Yeah, so that kind of affects it.
Yeah, and there is no, touring is never about, yeah, we know that we could use somebody else, but there isn't money to keep you at the level you're at. That is, right, like, yeah. That is the biggest non-starter in music.
And there's a part where, like, as you know, sometimes there's just not, like, there's not space. Like, there might be plenty of money, but, you know, logistically there's not space.
Right.
And a lot of times, like, I mean, on the tour you and I did, there wasn't, for the maybe hour and a half a day I needed a second set of hands, it didn't justify it.
Yeah.
Right? So I just took on the work.
Yeah. As you were saying all that, I was thinking about how I've always thought that TMing and running front of house as the same person has got to be awful. But then I know how little you would do during a show. Right. And so it's actually not, true. It's actually not that bad. No, like, in a lot of honestly, ways.
And that's one of those things, like, so the hardest part on that is, and if you have good people, like if you have a good monitor engineer, you have a good stage manager, whatever you have. Yeah. Like, it's all in dealing with the artist at that point. So, like, if your artist is okay with not being handheld by your tour manager, it's easy. I loved doing the TM front of house thing. When I knew that, like, I would walk out to front of house 10 minutes before the show, have a cup of coffee usually.
Yeah.
Right? Like, sit out there, talk to my lighting guy, kind of get the vibe of the crowd, loosen, oh, this is great. And it kind of, that was being a musician to me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And there was a lot of, like, endorphin release moments of, like, being out there and being in the middle of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I do miss. But it was great. And then, like, hey, at the end of the night, man, I loved it when I was truly doing that. And I had a tech who set up my gear for me.
Yeah.
Like, the show would end, I'd play a song for 4 minutes while I was packing up my computer and checking my messages. And, hey, the guys are on the bus. Great. I'll be back there in 2 minutes, and walk out the back of the room. Right.
Yeah.
That was awesome. I had artists who were okay with me not being there right away. Some other artists, if you're not there to catch them as they're coming down off the stage, it's a whole different story. And so,
yeah, and that just becomes, it is impossible to have those two things be the same person.
Right.
The case. Like, and that is, I try to have so much empathy for artists because, as primarily a bass player, like on the gig,
right,
like on the road, as someone like who only plays bass, I have a lot of respect for the fact that my ability to work is contingent on this other person's ability to work.
Right. And
so in touring, I have a lot of time for the notion that, it is this person's name on the marquee.
Right.
Nobody else has that.
Right.
And so there's that. And so the idea that, if the artist is like, nope, I need that thing, then you can't have someone that is a TM in front of house.
Correct.
Like that is how that diverges.
Yeah.
Yeah. Real brief, because, we've been going a little while, and there's no chance that you're not going to be back here often.
Oh, fantastic.
It is already in my brain that there is like a group of people that is just sort of the like, I don't have anybody lined up or whatever, but I need another one. Let's bring in some of the team, like, yeah. Put me in, coach.
Yeah.
We can waste an hour and a half or whatever.
I'm
on whatever.
I'm the guy who sits in the bullpen. You're like, yeah, I guess we bring him out for a couple of pitches.
Yeah. So, this year you moved away from tour managing and doing or just road work into being the GM at PTP. What does PTP stand for?
Production Technology Partners.
Yeah, that's right. I know that, but in a world where
the people,
in a world where we're real friends,
Yeah.
and like it's like being in college. Like, no one that went to Berkeley ever said the words Berkeley Performance Center. It was the BPC.
Right.
Everybody knows.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we're actual friends, so PTP means that to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I could probably tell you if I really thought about it, but. Obviously, as like a good family man and someone who's been doing the road stuff a long time, I don't think I think it's pretty obvious what would be appealing about making that change. Like if you were, yes, there's that. And being wanted to be there, but it sort of takes you from being a production manager for one thing to being a production manager for, like, you are like the Super Saiyan
a lot of
production manager, over everything.
Right.
And so what's that like?
It's really fun. So you and I have talked about this before. Currently, now that I'm off the road and I have multiple tours that I'm working with. Yeah. It's really fun to see my fingerprint on multiple things. It used to be really fun to see your fingerprint on a show, right?
Yeah, on the one thing.
And to every night go in and out of a building and go, we've made an impression, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm a big fan of, like, I want to make an impression. I want people to remember me, and I want it to be a good memory, right? Yeah. So now I get to do that with multiple things. And so it's, in a world of Instagram pictures and nobody really knowing the truth, that's for the next episode. There's this moment. There's like, I can see multiple shows happening. I can see, last weekend we had 9 artists on the road simultaneously.
Yeah.
That all had stuff of ours.
Yeah, which is crazy because you describe PTP as a smaller company.
Right.
Which is true, but
Right.
it's also insane to think
yeah.
like that some of those tours are gigantic.
Correct.
And stuff. And, so
and
like,
that's
there's 9 of them.
And so like, and you look at those and you go, like, every one of those that is out there, my hands were in part of that.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool to go, wow, like I'm making, like, the people who are in there, you would know the quote. You would know the quote better than I. Dave Grohl had a quote. He did that article for Variety during COVID about everybody, like everybody in the audience is there for the same and different reasons at the same time.
Yeah.
And how like the moment affects everybody differently, but we're all there because of music.
Man, I'll tell you what. When I had wanted to write something about this, but when we went to the Taylor Swift show,
Yeah.
you know, which I mean, besides the fact that
Subscribe to Substack, Matt O'Donnell, because it never comes to your inbox.
yeah,
Sorry. I digress.
but the idea that like I was like way edible high for that show, and it was the Rain show, like of the 3, and so like, and I love that because I love the romanticism of like. And I was telling
you
my
were
friends,
highly multi-sensory at that show.
well, but I was telling friends, even if I hadn't been fucking stoned,
Right.
I would have still been saying, like, I know we're standing here in this like blistering fucking rain, but if they let us in and that show happens, because there's an implicit amount of tension that comes with the build up to going to a show.
Yes.
When you delay it and when it's because of rain, it makes it so much more. And being just like huddled shoulder to shoulder with people outside the concession stand on the 3rd level of Nissan
Right.
was, and I knew, I was just like, if they get this show to happen, this is going to be it.
Right.
And our seats were second from the last row. We didn't get those hot seats.
Yeah.
But I loved it because, for one, I loved sitting there and saying, like, looking at my friends and saying, it's crazy. You can't do this bigger than this.
Correct.
Like, yes, Glastonbury draws more bodies than a football stadium can,
Right.
but the PA is the same size. It just happens to be that there is a bigger field in which to put people in. Like, this is the biggest level of production. And also, from a human standpoint, looking at watching everybody from as high as you could be in there and watching all these groups of people getting hyped at the same time. Mm-hmm. Like, and being like, everybody's having the best moment of their life right now with this bumping house music and all this. And that was like super endearing. And that is sort of like the feeling of that quote.
Yeah. And so that, it's funny. That's my favorite part. In all my years of touring, my favorite part of the show, my favorite part of my night was getting on a radio and asking if everybody's ready to start.
Yeah.
That is my favorite part. Also, my counterpoint to your Rain Taylor Swift story is seeing Dave Matthews in Boulder when they recorded the Live in Boulder record.
Oh, yeah.
So I was at one of the 2 shows and it rained leading up and we thought they were going to cancel the show. And it was that sitting there and like going, oh man, please don't.
Yeah.
And then when they finally, like, the skies cleared and it was like, yes. And then it was a glorious evening.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure that there are better rain shows than that Taylor Swift rain show.
Because on our next episode, we'll talk about the Taylor Swift theories that I have, and then follow that with our love for Dave Matthews.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, but you were talking about like...
Yeah, so just being able to like to know that you're part of these things, right?
Yeah.
You're part of this community of people who love music. And there are people who went to these shows that like had, really happy moments. These are memories that maybe they're going to have for the rest of their life, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It might have been somebody's first experience at a concert. It might be maybe somebody fell in love, maybe somebody fell out of love, maybe like there's so much that happens. There's so much emotion. And now I have the ability to like have that in multiple forms, even though I'm not there.
Yeah.
And so, and it's made me actually appreciate shows more. And so like,
Sure.
Man, like I went and saw a Sweaty Club show a couple months ago with my 16-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And it made me love music again. Cause I forgot what it was like to be, I was so jaded in some of those moments because I was like, I spent
so long not going to shows.
Oh, I mean,
and then COVID, I wasn't in that brand of like, but COVID was such a reset for me in so many ways of that I wasn't the person like, oh, thank God we can go to shows again. It was like, we went to a couple shows and I was like, oh yeah, I do love this.
Yeah.
I really love this. As much as I love being on stage, I also love this. Like, and it's both. It's not one pitted against the other.
Right.
It's just that wherever I happen to be, I love this.
I don't know if we ever talked about when Abby and I went to the basement to see Lovejoy.
A little bit.
But it was like, so here's the short version is this. Like, it was the first show in a very long time that I bought tickets when they came on sale.
Yep.
B, stood in line.
Yeah, this is the part that I know.
Yeah, like I stood in line. I walked into a club and was not surrounded by a barricade.
Mm-hmm.
I had to pay for my own beer.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like all of these things. And in the midst of screaming teenage girls was like, wow. These it was, oddly enough, it was one of my daughter's first real club shows.
Mm.
This is the same girl who from birth has been in more rehearsals than most people see concerts in their life.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Like she saw the tours before they went out. We have one of my favorite pictures of her. She's sitting behind a freaking monster audio desk.
Yeah.
And she's 5 years old and, playing with the faders. And I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
There are so many people who will never see that, right? Yeah. Never be able to experience that.
Absolutely.
Like she's 1% of 1% who can ever experience these things, right? Listening to music that hasn't been released yet for a tour that's about to go around the world.
Yeah.
And she's 5 years old playing with her horses on the front of house console.
Yeah.
Like amazing. But to be able to be surrounded by people who are all there to see a band and to watch people who are truly like sobbing and weeping because it's that emotional.
Yeah.
And people just being able to, people of all different viewpoints in a room together because of music, like that's amazing. And so like right now for me, being able to see that, especially when you have a company that works in multiple genres, right? Like you see this happening and it's like, oh,
you've got the whole world in your hands.
Well, yeah, like we're touching people.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Somebody call HR. but
I think you're still HR.
Yeah, some days. But it's the thing is, it's just, I mean, gosh, live music in general brings people together.
Yeah.
Live music is amazing, especially I think big shows are amazing. Small shows are incredible. Yep. Like go support your local artists, like go pay $10 and go see a show. Right. Like,
yeah.
You know what? Go to a club, even if you don't drink, just go in and drop $10 in the tip jar.
Yeah.
For the band, or drop $5 for the band and $5 for the bartenders. Yeah. Right. Like these are people who they're making people happy. They're bringing joy to people. And
yeah. So last thing before we wrap this up is I was talking where we spent some time talking about how you take care of people and you're invested in the people that that you had when you were on the road, like you were invested in those people and everyone thinks of you as being concerned with them. And that is true sometimes to a fault. how do you translate that thing from the road into the staff that you have at PTP? Like, how are you developing being Dave? You know, because that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
like you being Dave, anyone that's been on the road with you knows what that means. And
Yeah.
so, like, how are you bringing that?
It's a very similar, it's a similar mindset, right? Like you can tell me if I'm wrong. I like people to know that I care.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in people's story. Like, I want to know about people. I want to know about their life. I want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
I want to find shared interest. And so, I mean, like, currently I have 19 people who direct report to me. So, I mean, it's kind of like being on the road, right?
Yeah,
like,
sure. Yeah, that's about it.
And it grows oddly daily. But it's that thing. It's like, okay, so how do you, like, talk to everybody, catch up with them, find out what's going on, like, know, hey, you know, so-and-so is having a hard, like, their dad's not doing good, or so-and-so, like, oh man, they broke their foot last week. And now we call them hops along. And that's like, and so you do those kind of things and you figure out, like, you just kind of start making these, like, little things and go, like, okay, how do I get to know people better? How do I get to serve people? There are people at the office who they probably think I'm annoying because, like, when they show up, I'm like, good morning, happy Wednesday. And then they're like, oh my gosh, how are you this morning? I'm like, I feel like crap. But I'm like, just trying to be like, look, we're all in this together. And, like, we're all in that moment.
I bet you're way more chipper now than on the road in the morning.
Well, okay. So,
although let's not act like I was not the last person
but, like,
that you got to, or that saw you.
This is the messed up thing about being on the road is that, like, you saw me 37 seconds after I got out of bed. Like, you saw me before I got to go pee.
Yeah. Well,
right?
that's the thing is I never saw that.
Well,
as an 11 o'clock wake up person.
I saw that a lot from you.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like touring's such a weird thing. So, like, yeah, by the time I get in to the office, I've had 2 cups of coffee. I've listened to some good music. I've probably listened to my news podcast, know my current events so I can talk about them. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
now you have a water cooler, so you have to have water cooler talk.
Exactly. You know, and it's like, and that's one thing is, like, now when I go to work, like, I make a carafe of coffee and I know who to deliver it to each day.
Sure.
Right. Like, and those are the things that, like, that's the fun part. Mm-hmm. And it's the part that creates that community. And so I'm still learning how to, like, develop that.
Sure.
But, you know.
Well, that's why I didn't ask. How have you done this?
Well, no.
And on one hand, I would be entirely confident that now, you know, 9 months into this process, that you'd figured it out. But I also know better than to, like, assume that you totally have. I'm
figuring it out. But I was always like, if you ask me how to do it on the road, I'd say I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Because everybody's different. And, like, you have to figure out, some people are harder to crack.
Yeah.
You know? And so.
Some people are harder to give crack to.
Yeah, exactly. And some people take it too easily. But no, like, I mean, that was the thing is, like, so, you know, you were the 11 o'clock wake up call, right? So, but I knew when I walked on the bus at 11:30, usually to get something, or honestly, I would make an excuse to go out. But it was one of those things that, like, you'd be there and, like, I would know to walk on the bus knowing it's you and one other person.
Yeah. And I'm figuring out what my name is for the first 20 minutes.
Right. And I knew that I could walk on and say something completely either out of line or slightly inappropriate or just, like, literally doesn't make any sense, and it would get a giggle from you, right?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
I knew that I could get that moment of, like, I could catch you off guard with something, you know, like, and then the Pope said, and it's like, and that's the thing is, you're like, what? Where's this coming?
Yeah.
And it was like, all right, cool. And so those are, like, and that's what I do at work, right? Like, everybody laughs because, like, this morning, like, even I went into our CFO's office and I was like, and he's in the middle of a massive finance thing that's going on. And I walked in there and I was like, man, an egg sandwich with like some arugula and prosciutto. And it literally derailed him in the best way. Because he literally, like, we just had a moment of like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, yeah. Ooh, what about a little feta? Right? Like,
Yeah.
And it literally was like, we just talked about it for a second. And it was like, just that moment of like, okay, like, we're not saving the world.
Yeah.
We're not curing cancer. We're not trying to launch a rocket into space. We are literally trying to make people happy at a concert.
Yeah, that's right.
And really, that's not that hard to do.
More
right?
people should be good at understanding that.
Right. Like, and so that's the, like, it's that, like, keeping everything at a little bit more realistic level of like, it's not the end of the world, right? What we do is turn on lights and make videos show up.
Yeah.
Right. Which is, and honestly, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then you get into discussions about things like finances and interest rates and capital expenditures, and you're like, but then you're like, at the same time, I'm currently 2-0 in the fantasy football league that I know nothing about.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to go 3-0 this week. I don't, whatever that means.
That's the worst part, is because you don't know what you're doing. I mean, I know this is the first time I'm hearing about it, but like when you're that person and you are the 2-0 person.
I beat the commissioner last week.
Yeah. You are the bane of everybody's existence.
Yeah. No, and it's I don't even have a good team, whatever that means. Like, I don't even know, but somehow I'm doing good.
Yeah, I love that.
I might win $20 at the end of the season. Who knows? And if I do, I'll buy coffee for everybody. So it's fun.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Well, that is plenty of our time.
Since it's now 4 hours into this, into this 60-minute podcast.
Now, next time we'll hit all the Syphil and Ollie and
oh gosh, man,
and MXC references and
welcome to the
good
Matt
stories.
and Dave podcast. This is all you're going to get ever.
A whole bunch of trash.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Dave.
Hey, thank you.
There it is, my conversation with my friend, Dave Jacquin. My apologies for a fair bit of chair squeaking in there. I hate this chair, and I just could not make those go all the way away. I'm sure Dave will be back at some point on another episode of the show. At the very end of my time editing that talk, Dave texted me to ask if I ever thought of what it would be like if a band like Candlebox released their first record today and no one had ever heard anything like that before. I promise you can't buy that kind of weird thought content. If you've made it this far into the episode, I really appreciate you. Thanks so much for listening to this inaugural episode of Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know. The next episode will be coming on January 30th. That's 2 weeks from now. I would greatly enjoy it if this schedule would get into your natural mind and body rhythm. Thanks. Until then, please feel free to reach out to me. I am Matt O'Donnell on Instagram, and there is now an account for the show as well. That is at Matt O'Donnell Wants to Know. Drop an email to mattodonnellwantstoKnow@gmail.com if you need some communication. As you will usually hear podcasters rant, ratings and subscriptions are incredibly helpful and very much appreciated. That'll do it for this round. I hope you'll join in next time. And remember, the best answer to a question is usually another question. See you around.